Welcome everybody here today for this lecture about watercolor. Breedline asked me to come here today to talk about a beautiful medium, very sensitive medium, which is unfortunately sometimes a bit under the radar. So I'm very happy to be here today. And what are we going to do? First of all, I will show you a little PowerPoint with some examples of my work and to show you my own development within this medium. Then we'll switch to a live demo of watercolor painting in a wet and wet technique. And then to top it all off, we will do a little interview. Frederick will ask me a couple of questions. And of course, there's also room for you guys to ask me anything about watercolor you want to know. Well, actually, first of all, what is watercolor and what makes it different from other types of paint? Well, for one thing, it is a very condensed type of paint. It's pure pigment and a little bit of Arabic gum, while other paints, and the cat is also there, while other paints often have fillings and other substances like oil to make it work. This is something, of course, watercolor, it says we use a lot of water to make our own paint, and it's very translucent, bright colors. And one important thing, which is kind of an amazing thing about watercolor, but also kind of a curse, is that it's always solvable again. So no matter what you do, no matter how old the work is, it's always solvable. So here we go. First of all, one of the big pioneers in watercolor, Wouter, with kind of a hero of mine, actually. He was one of the people who really took this to another level. And for the example we see here is something he made almost like a journalist, where there was a big fire at the time in London. And he went out on the streets and made this watercolor of really spontaneous, beautiful, bright colors. And you see this amazing use of light in it. And that brings me to one of the other things, which is so characteristic about this medium, is that you don't use white paint. Well, in other mediums, you always use white to create the light inside in your painting. Here we use the white of the paper, and that's it. You know? So it makes it like a completely different mindset when you start painting. You have to be quite aware of everything you do. And you have to think about how you're going to do it before you do it, to keep the light, to make sure you don't paint everything flat. Hans op de Beek, a great contemporary artist, Belgian artist, who is mostly famous for his films and his huge installations, but he also makes amazing watercolors, often quite big. Really big works, and mostly in grey and dark tones, but also again an amazing use of light and depth and different textures in this work. Last one, I'll show you as an example of some people who inspire me or I think do something valuable today in watercolor. It's Karen Walker. She has an exhibition now in the Pont in Tilburg as well. An American artist who has a very direct use of the medium. It's more like a sketchy way of working, very spontaneous, and also themes which are often closely related to things happening in society, black history, slavery, and she is really a very strong voice in this debate with her work. So for her art is very much related to social injustice and things like that. Just to say that this medium, which is often in people's minds related to things like flowers or nice landscapes, it can be everything you want, you know? Of course, flowers are great to paint with watercolor, but there's so much more, and it's just up to the artist to take it and do with it what you want. So I'll show you some of my own works. I started really seriously doing watercolor about maybe 12, 13 years ago, 2009, I think. And I really didn't know much about it because it's something that's really not taught in any academy today. Maybe some people are dabbling in it, but it's really something which is not on the program of any art school nowadays. So I really have to teach myself. I'm really a self-taught watercolor painter, although I did art school before. And for me it was something which felt so natural. The fact that you move with the water and that you have to, it's like you have to plunge into it, and it will never be exactly as you think it will be, because the water has a way of moving by itself, and you have to go with it. You have to be very careful watching the water movements on the paper, adding little bits of pigment. It's not like big movements, it's not bold and it's more sensuous and almost like a meditation maybe. Huh? How did I come to my subjects? They were often based in personal fears, certain things that happened in my life, and I transformed them into I would say performance-like settings, like very theatrical settings, which I photographed, often using myself as a model, and then I turned them into watercolors. Also using what you'd call negative space, to use the white of the paper as a shape. So not just as the way I'll show you here as well. So you can really juxtapose forms and shapes against each other by not painting them. And the curious thing is that the white here, for some reason, optically is different from the white here, while it's exactly the same color. You know? It's how your mind works. Then a little bit something about the why of this painting. I was a young father at the time, and there were a lot of things in the news at the time about parents who had harmed their own children, which of course was something that came as a complete, I couldn't relate to that at all. In how would you be able to hurt your own kid? But I was thinking about it and about these different roles you take upon yourself when you become a parent. You are a protector, so this is what I try to depict here. But you can also be a threat, and this work is, which is more of a, like, what's he going to do? What's going to happen here? You know? Another one as another role as a like the playmate. You are like the friend and the one who is like fooling around a bit with the kids. Then from that point on, after a couple of years using this kind of technique, I wanted to move away from that, and I want to explore new ways for myself of dealing with this metal, this medium. And I'd say also my work became a little less involved in the personal stuff, but it was more about the world around me, things that I saw happening around me. And I made a series about statues, mythical statues. I always found them quite fascinating. Like, they are in the cities all around us, and we often have no idea what they exactly mean anymore, you know? So they are kind of there and really in your face, but what are they doing there? What are they mean? What's their meaning? And from these big statues, I transformed. I had to think of when I was a kid playing with these little toy soldiers. Spent lots of hours playing with them. So then that became another kind of motive in my work. And here, technically, I had quite a different approach, a different process from the work you saw before. Here I first covered the whole paper in a layer of really wet on wet paint. Let it dry, then added several layers of the actual motif, the actual shape, in this case a toy soldier. And afterwards I worked again on it with colored inks and watercolor to create these blotches, but quite in a quite playful way. Also, they got bigger over time, because this is kind of already, I guess, for most people working with watercolor, this is kind of quite big, but I wanted to make it larger, to kind of, I felt I needed to almost treat it in a way you would treat an oil painting when it comes to the size. That it wouldn't have to be something nice and small because it's watercolor. You know, it can be big, it can be monumental. This is the one. This is the largest one I did to date. I think it's about 2 meters high, I guess. Very layered work, a lot happening, and it's almost the opposite from what I did in my earlier work, which is quite minimal. Here I did a lot. You know, there's a lot happening on the surface, a lot of layers, lots of colors, things moving against each other. On this particular work, it was a series that was inspired by street art here in Antwerp, where someone, I don't know who, created a lot of mural works, and I was fascinated by the way they got affected by the weather. Like, they started to disintegrate, and that was something I tried to just to depict in this work. Then moving again away from that to something a bit more direct, yeah. Because in my I felt this series where I just showed you the one from, it got a bit overworked, it got a bit too heavy. on the surface. So I wanted to create something which was lighter, not so much on the subject matter, but as a painting, you know, to use this typical thing of watercolor, to use this light more to my advantage. Which then brought me to a series of work about the four elements: fire, earth, water, wind, or air. And I felt like, okay, so this was like 2 years ago I started working on this. But when you talk about fire, like what is the most intense fire there is? Well, to me, that was atomic explosion. So that's what I started painting, and it was almost, it felt like I really doubted, like, can I take a subject like this and make it into something that is actually beautiful? And then I thought, yeah, why not? It can also be, and making art, and the process of making art can also be like almost a ritual to get rid of your own fears, you know, to bezweren, ik weet niet wat het woord in het Engels is, maar om te
bezweren.
Ja.
Conjure.
Conjure, yeah. Okay, ja, dat is meer oproepen denk ik, maar anyway. Yeah, okay, I'll show you a little close-up of the work, and here, this is a completely different technique also I used, because in the first tablet works I showed you, I used a technique which was more like wet on dry, so the surface, the paper was dry, and I painted on it with obviously wet mixtures of color. While here I chose which is probably the most radical technique within the range of watercolor, is wet on wet. So you really soak your paper first, and then you paint on it, and so you have almost no control over how the paint will evolve, and will keep on changing while you're painting until the whole period that your paper is wet. It will change, and so you keep adding little bits, and you keep lifting up bits again to create the effect you want. It's quite fascinating, and also something I discovered in this particular work is that I mixed two different colors. I think it was an ultramarine blue and alizarin crimson, which is this one. And so you made this mixture, and while it was drying, they kind of split again. So it means that some parts of the paint get stuck on the paper earlier than others, so the red was flowing more than the blue, which I thought was a really surprising and cool effect that you can use to your advantage. But it's something that's quite unpredictable, and that makes it exciting to me. It's like a dance. It's like letting go and taking control, constantly moving between the one and the other. Last one from the same series, but on the subject of water. I thought about water. What is a motive which can be water? So I came to the jellyfish. Beautiful creatures, very translucent. In a way, it can also be almost an explosion again. Of course, this beautiful creature is also not harmless. It stings when it touches your skin. And because, like I said, first of all, when I started painting, it's all about human form, very personal stuff, and I wanted to move away from that, so I started to incorporate more natural phenomenon, natural themes. But I just realized a couple of weeks ago that actually, when you talk about, when this is about violence and power and stuff, that actually, of course, painting a natural phenomenon like fire, like a explosion, is in the end also about power and the human misabuse of power. So you don't escape your own subjects in the end, even though you sometimes think you do as an artist. Okay, that was it for the presentation here. Now we're going to do a little bit of painting. You can come closer if you want, so you can have a good look.